Japan is stepping up efforts to contain a rise in coronavirus infections by expanding and extending its third state of emergency of the pandemic. Stricter virus measures have been in place for Tokyo, Osaka, Hyogo, and Kyoto prefectures since late April. As of Wednesday, the emergency declaration also covers Aichi and Fukuoka. It will remain in effect until the end of this month. Officials in the capital reported 969 new infections. That's the highest tally for a Wednesday since late January. Officials in Osaka confirmed 851 new cases and said 50 people lost their lives. That's its second highest death toll for a single day. Still, the health minister says the prefecture may have turned a corner.
We're hoping that the number of new infections in Osaka has peaked and is now falling due to the state of emergency and other measures.
However, in Tokyo, Tamura says the emergency measures haven't had a noticeable impact so far. The spreading infections continue to put the country's medical system under strain. There are now almost 1,200 COVID-19 patients in serious condition. Experts say variants are partly to blame for the surge, but a group of scientists in Japan say their research suggests the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine may be effective against these new strains. They found that about 90% of recipients had enough antibodies to be considered effective against 7 variants, including those first detected in the UK, South Africa, Brazil, and India. The research group at Yokohama City University examined blood samples from 105 healthcare workers who had received both jabs.
More than 90% had neutralizing antibodies. That's a promising result in terms of herd immunity.
Health authorities confirmed more than 7,000 new infections across the country on Wednesday. The government has been stepping up border controls as a countermeasure. Officials are planning to expand the current entry ban to include foreigners with resident status in Japan who've stayed in India, Pakistan, or Nepal within 14 days of their arrival. The measure could start on Friday. Turning now to India, which is struggling with a devastating COVID-19 surge. The crisis has prompted Prime Minister Narendra Modi to cancel a trip to Britain for an upcoming G7 summit. Modi had been invited to attend the summit in person next month. India's foreign ministry announced he had decided not to go due to the coronavirus situation. Indian health authorities reported the daily death toll hit a record 4,205 on Wednesday. More than 348,000 new cases were confirmed. The surge is pushing the country's healthcare system to the brink of collapse. On Monday, tragedy struck at a hospital in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh. Local media report 11 coronavirus patients died after their oxygen supply was briefly cut off. Hospital officials reportedly explained that the oxygen pressure had dropped for a few minutes while a cylinder was being replaced. With oxygen still in short supply, the death rate is soaring, and rural areas are coming under increasing pressure. International efforts are underway to help the country. India is set to receive a second delivery of emergency aid from Japan on Wednesday, including 100 devices for enriching oxygen. The World Health Organization says the potentially worrisome coronavirus variant first identified in India has been detected in 49 countries and territories. The countries include the United States, Britain, France, Russia, China, and Japan. The WHO on Monday designated the strain as a variant of concern and will step up efforts to track and analyze it. This is the fourth coronavirus variant to be added to the list after the 3 first confirmed in Brazil, Britain, and South Africa. The WHO says the variant appears to be highly transmissible and could be one of the factors behind several countries seeing a surge in infections. It also pointed to preliminary research that suggests the variant could limit the effects of medications and neutralizing antibodies. Japan is giving around another $700 million to the COVAX program, which is trying to make sure poorer countries receive coronavirus vaccines. The scheme aims to distribute 1.8 billion doses by the end of this year. That's enough to inoculate people in about 30% of the world's developing nations and territories. The facility says it's $1.7 billion short of the $8.3 billion it needs. Japan has already chipped in $200 million. The government says it's giving more to help the global fight against the pandemic. Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide is expected to speak about the move at an online vaccine summit early next month. Japan is sponsoring the event along with Gavi, the organization that runs COVAX. Violence between Israel and Palestinian militants has been escalating, killing more people and sparking international concern. Israel's military has been carrying out airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. The campaign is reported to have leveled buildings and left at least 43 dead, including children. The Islamic fundamentalist group Hamas has responded by firing rockets into Israeli cities, including the biggest commercial hub, Tel Aviv. Israel says 6 people were killed. Since mid-April, Jerusalem has been rocked by a series of clashes. That's after Israeli police confronted Palestinians visiting the holy site at the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. The Israeli military appears to be ready to send troops toward Gaza for a ground operation. An expert on the Middle East says it's impossible to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza, as it's one of the most densely populated areas in the world. He says Washington is key to resolving the situation.
President Joe Biden's administration has only had limited involvement in the Middle East so far. In a way, that can be said to have led to the current situation and could cause it to deteriorate further.
Nakagawa added that President Biden must review his Middle East strategy. A prominent anti-government activist in Thailand charged with defaming the monarchy has been released on bail after spending months in detention. Parit Chiwarak was released from a prison in Bangkok along with another protest leader after a court granted him bail on Tuesday. His lawyer says Parit's health has deteriorated following a hunger strike lasting over 50 days. The university student is one of the key figures in the protests that started last year, calling for royal reform and the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. The conditions of Parit's bail include a prohibition on insulting the monarchy. Local media say calling for royal reform has become difficult, and activists may have to consider a change of tactics. In Thailand, insulting the monarchy is a crime punishable by up to 15 years in prison. Several activists have been indicted this year. A white man accused of killing 6 women of Asian descent and 2 others in the U.S. state of Georgia has been indicted on a range of crimes, including murder. In March, Robert Aaron Long was arrested for allegedly shooting dead a total of 8 people at a massage parlor and 2 spas. 2 separate grand juries indicted him on 19 charges on Tuesday. Local media outlets say prosecutors intend to argue in court that the attacks were motivated by racism or racial bigotry. The media have reported that juries in Georgia determine whether an incident is a hate crime after a defendant has been convicted. Rallies against anti-Asian discrimination were staged after the incidents in Atlanta, New York, and other places around the country. Japan's main governing and opposition parties have called off a lower house committee vote on revising the country's immigration law. The Diet Affairs chiefs of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party and the Constitutional Democratic Party will continue discussing the matter on Thursday. The government drafted the revision in response to the growing number of foreigners detained at immigration facilities. It would allow deportees who refuse to leave Japan to stay with family members or supporters if they meet certain conditions. But it would also allow immigration officials to deport foreigners even while their papers are being processed. This would include people who have filed for refugee status more than 3 times or have been sentenced to more than 3 years in prison in Japan. The governing party is set to put the bill to a vote on Wednesday, saying it had been fully debated in the lower house Judicial Affairs Committee. But the opposition is refusing to vote on the bill until more details are released about the death of a Sri Lankan woman in detention. The woman in her 30s died in March at a detention facility in Nagoya in central Japan. She was being held for overstaying her visa. Her family is calling for more information about her death.
Fighting between Hamas militants and Israeli forces intensifies. Palestinian officials say Israeli airstrikes killed more than 50 Palestinians, while Hamas rockets killed at least 6 Israelis. Chinese officials say they hope the U.S. will be fair to Chinese companies after the U.S. moves to lift restrictions on the Chinese communications equipment company, Xiaomi. The Philippines reports 287 Chinese ships entered the waters of its exclusive economic zone, calling the entries illegal. And Japanese officials canceled the Olympic torch ceremony in the Fukuoka area because of the coronavirus state of emergency.
Israeli missiles have destroyed another high-rise tower in Gaza City and killed top commanders in the military wing of Hamas. The health ministry in Gaza says that at least 56 people have been killed since Monday. Palestinian militants have fired more waves of rockets towards Gaza, towards Israel's cities. One of the rockets hit an apartment building in Sderot, seriously wounding a young child. In other news, US Republicans have voted to remove one of their senior team in Congress, Liz Cheney, over her continued criticism of Donald Trump. She was one of the Republicans to vote to impeach him. And an independent report into the world's response to the coronavirus pandemic has concluded that there were serious failures by both the WHO and governments. It says Europe and America wasted time before declaring an emergency.